after the announcement by our President Cyril Ramaphosa of the closure of lockdown level 5, hospitality, as you know, has been really badly affected, and hotels in particular, restaurants, you know, it's really tough out there. I'm not going to try and say anything differently. It's a tough environment to be in. And we had been approached in lockdown level 5 by an essential services company who managed call centers, so medical and life call centers, so medical aids, medical rescue, that kind of thing. And they obviously, as an essential services, were able to open in their premises, but were forward thinking and saying, well, if our staff are going to be traveling in as essential workers, surely we are putting them at risk. So let's mitigate that risk. And they approached us, and we were talking about possibly becoming their home for the lockdown, the initial 21-day lockdown period. And that sadly sort of fell through. They made a decision that it wasn't financially viable for them to move the call center to the hotel. And so on Thursday, it was a very sad day. We were mothballing the hotel. It was 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. I don't think there was anybody left. I was one of the last people still at the hotel, you know, just not wanting to leave my home, not wanting to accept that we were closing the hotel for certainly 21 days. But even at that time, I think everybody in hospitality knew it was going to be a lot longer. And got the lifeline call from the call center, from their directors, to say that they'd rethought everything and were in fact going to lock down their staff with us. So that was obviously, everybody had to be in by midnight of Thursday because that was when lockdown came into place. So we scrambled, and it was a lot of fun. and that's how we started. So we started essentially for 3 weeks as a lockdown with a essential services group, which then extended on for the further 2 weeks of the 5 weeks. And they became so much part of the family. And we had the most incredible team at Indaba lockdown with the group. Just, you learn so much. Like, you start to understand what a home away from home actually means. And we all speak about that in hospitality, but we don't really experience it. We try to make it a home as much as possible, but our travelers tend to be transient. We'll have people, you know, long stays is a month, certainly not a really endlessly long time. And especially when you're locked down, you know, if you're a tourist or a business traveler, you go places, you do things, and you come and you sleep at the hotel. Lockdown's a whole different level of service and entertainment. So we had the group, and absolutely phenomenal. Loved having them with us, and certainly they still just, we get messages on a daily basis from them. We've made some amazing new friends there. And again, they were moving out on the Friday, and we were then approached by DPW, Department of Public Works, who have been absolutely amazing throughout this entire process. I know that there's a lot of negativity out there about the government and way things have been handled, but I can say from the Indaba that we have just had the most amazing support structure from DPW and Department of Health throughout the entire process. And because we were open with an on-site quarantine team effectively in place for the essential services group, we were approached to say that there was a flight coming in that was actually supposed to be going to another hotel who weren't able to mobilize. And we had put our name forward as a repatriation quarantine hotel. So we were on the list. Lumka's nodding her head, so she looks after this side for me. So she had done her job really well. She'd filled out all the paperwork, done what she needed to do. So we were there on the list, and they phoned us and said it was quite a large group. They needed quite a lot of rooms. Indaba's obviously a big hotel. And we got a call quite late to say, would you be able to mobilize the hotel that they were supposed to be going to, can only mobilize tomorrow, and these guests are already in the air. And because we had the team in, it's just almost was meant to be. So it was incredible. So yes, we could mobilize. And in fact, that was our first repatriation group. It was the most amazing group. Mostly elderly passengers became Candices babies. And they came in from Australia, long haul flight, absolutely exhausted. And we checked them into the hotel at 2 o'clock on Friday morning. And that was the start of our repatriation journey. And it's been incredible from there.
Incredible. Should we hand over to Candice to take us through the next part of that journey? I've got a lot of questions, but I think if you can kind of talk us through what happened next. How did this kick off?
So, obviously they arrived and everything, and that being elderly, obviously they were also very lonely, so you had to take that aspect into consideration. And you know, it's a very different role that I played. So in the beginning, from a corporate key account manager to now PR, and PR not in the sense of a normal hotel, but in the sense of literally the phone is ringing off the hook with their needs and their requirements. So, and you know, we have protocol that's put in place, and we've obviously been briefed on that protocol. But obviously there's a fine line between hospitality and protocol. So I'm always the one who's never says no. So I found that very challenging in that aspect. But we obviously created a WhatsApp group as well, just to keep the people informed. Because you got to remember, they're very lonely people, especially the elderly. They've got no one to look after them. Some are like, you know, they're coming from perhaps a retirement village, and they've got to get back there kind of thing. And they obviously children were in Australia at the time. So they're lonely, they're worried, they're frail. So all those aspects you have to take into consideration. And one of the things is, obviously from that start, we started a WhatsApp group informing them. I used to phone, obviously, the very elderly on a daily basis, just to let them know or see if they're okay, you know, because you worry if they're not okay in the room by themselves. So that was one of the aspects. And then a competition group, because you obviously have to boost their positivity as well. So that was very important. And just, I think, you know, the compassion comes in it. Although there's protocol and people say a quarantine site and everyone goes, you know, you can stay in your room, you have to do this, you have to do that. The basis is the compassion behind it. And I'm very much for that. And that's perhaps, you know, we got loads of great reviews and the team on board here worked fantastic, from the nurses to Lunka's team with the nurses. They were really amazing in helping everybody, all the elderly through it. So we had that group in, and that was fantastic, and they became friends. I mean, I've got them on my WhatsApp group now already. So on a daily basis, we still chat and talk. So that's quite nice. And then we got a group in from Saudi Arabia, a fantastic group as well. Obviously different challenges in terms of their dietary requirements and so forth. Remember, you got to take into consideration these things as well. And there were obviously some challenges that we undertook, but very positive in the end. And then we now currently have a group in from India. Again, the dietary requirements, the cultures, the gender. So there's a lot that one has to take into consideration. So whilst we say PR, it's not necessarily, you know, being there like in their rooms with them, but listening to them, seeing to the requirements and making sure that we can exceed the expectations, because that's what we're here for, not just a quarantine hotel, making it a home away from home. So that's, yeah, so that's kind of where we are, well, I am at the moment. So it's been challenging, I won't lie. As I say, I don't say no, and if the hotel knows, so I've had to say no on a few occasions, and I find that quite challenging and emotionally draining, actually. But all in all, I mean, it's been a fantastic journey, and I've really enjoyed doing it. So yeah. That's
okay, great. I think as I say, we're a lot of, I'm building up a whole stack of questions, and I hope other people are also. But let's move to Lunka.
Yes.
And Lunka, you're an opportunity to tell us about your role.
Okay. So my role is a little bit opposite to Candice's. So I am the nurses liaison, meaning that because we're a hotel and we're not used to operating as a quarantine site, there are certain things that we want to do as a hotel and to pamper our clients, but we can't. So me being with the nurses ensures that we are able to do, to a certain extent, what we are known for as hoteliers, which is being hospitable to our clients, but at the same time not putting anyone's life at risk, because this is very serious. What we have here, essentially, we are the frontliners, like the people that are in the hospitals. We have people that could possibly have COVID, and we need to ensure that we do not let anyone spread it outside. We keep the country safe until these people are cleared to go home. So it's a bit of a catch-22. You You want to make your client happy because this is a hotel, but at the same time, you have to be considerate that this is actually very serious. It's a quarantine site. So it's been a heck of a journey to try and find the balance. But like we said, the Department of Health and the nurses have been so supportive, and we've had so many positive reviews, even from the nurses, because they've been to other hotels where the same thing is being done, where they say, you guys are taking so much consideration into everything, because other hotels just take it as, oh, okay, we are not involved, you do your thing, and then it tends not to be comfortable. And we are trying to make it as comfortable as possible for the people here. And what else? With Candice. I laugh because every 5 minutes I get a call from her to say, this needs to happen, can we do it? And my first instinct is to say no, but at the same time I put on my hotelier hat and say, okay, maybe we can do it this way. That way everyone is safe, and at the same time someone can be made comfortable where they are. I mean, 14 days in your room waiting to find out if you're okay or not is a long time, and it's quite scary for some of the people.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, how does the process, so this nursing team that joined you, did they join you from the first day that you said you are now going to operate as a hotel into this new?
We've been fortunate that the team that's here hasn't been changed. So since we started, we've had the same set of nurses. So they were here from the very first day when the first group came, and they've managed to stay with us throughout the entire stay.
And were they allocated by kind of a government department?
Yes,
to come to
they're allocated by the Department of Health, and then obviously we deal with them here. They have their rooms here. They're also quarantined with all of us.
Okay. Something that I think for a lot of hotels, it's a big question for them. What is it like to check someone in this environment? Whereas before, you know, so many hotels you'd arrive at, there's a huge group of people in the foyer, they're all milling around, everyone's sitting on top of each other, they're waiting to be checked in as a group. It's like, what you're doing now is sort of what I anticipate will be the future for the next year or so, maybe two. What, if I'm checking into your hotel, what happens from the minute my feet land outside your front door?
So if you're checking into a hotel that is a quarantine site, you don't even come to reception. So your registration is next to your room. Literally, you get a room key card placed there, and you take it and you go into your room. So no formalities. Even your name gets taken afterwards. So once you're in the room, your details will be taken in, because there cannot be contact between you and the staff. There's very, very limited contact to avoid the spread of the disease.
Front desk, what happens to people who would normally be doing a front desk operation? They are not part of the...
Well, like myself, being an accounts manager who's essentially a salesperson, we've lost all those hats. So everyone does something. There are people who used to be front desk operators, but they're doing other things. They are doing other things during this time.
And tell us, and then you talked about obviously, you know, people being confined to their rooms to some extent. Is that, are they allowed outside? Are they allowed to interact in a public space? Or is that done in a way that they don't encounter other people?
Essentially, they shouldn't be socializing with other people. They should be practicing social distancing, and this is what we're doing. So what we advise them is that you can stretch your legs out just outside of your room. We're fortunate that we're not a high-rise hotel. So people are able to step out into our grass area, but what they need to ensure is that they wear their masks, and also when they go out, there's no one else. Because our grounds are so big, they're able to do that, alternating the times. So one person will go out for about 30 minutes, walk around and go back to their room, and then the next person can check and do the same. And I must say it has worked out amazingly. At least the people don't get what we hear other hotels are getting, which is cabin fever, because they cannot go out because it's high-rise hotels, and the only place they can go out to is corridors, and they're not allowed. So that's a plus for us.
I'd just like to interject there. So basically, what Lumka's saying is quite right. So it's very much specified. So people are allowed out. We try to minimize it as much as possible because we are indeed a quarantine site. And I think the most difficult thing for us is the guests with us are no longer guests, but they call them PUIs. So possibly people who have people under investigation. Isn't that the most awful thing to call a guest? So we sort of have to treat everybody as much as we want to hug and kiss and cuddle them like we normally do, and just really treat them, to true Indaba hospitality. We do have to be aware and we do have to be careful. So, but also trying to understand. So, and it's something that I'll go back. Numka's touched on the nurses, but we have also been allocated two of the most amazing doctors who did the first briefing with us and who are on a WhatsApp group with us to give us advice. They're in and out. They're assisting with the testing, getting the test back as fast as possible. And in fact, one of the doctors said to us, I want to say in his previous life, but that sounds so strange. But before COVID, in his previous life, he used to come to Indaba and enjoy the facilities, been through to our Moana Spa, been through our gin school. And he said, if you can just give each of the guests a little bit of what I know the Indaba is, that would be so important to us. So as much as we're trying to look after their wellness, we also appreciate that mental wellness is so important. And that's where the Indaba really does come in, where Candice is looking after people, like she'll make those phone calls. It's just sometimes just for a chat, just that there's somebody else there. And to be able to actually step outside. And then what the nurses in Lumka are doing, and she's sort of playing it down quite a bit, is they actually, so because we're not a high rise, we've got blocks of rooms. And so what we do is we'll say, okay, so this block of rooms is allocated this area to exercise at such and such a time. And it sounds a little bit like prison regime-like, but that's actually to minimize risk. So let's say I've got 12 rooms in a block in my 7th block, and those people have all been exercising only in a limited area. So there's been minimized risk, minimized contact with other guests. Well, no contact with other guests, minimized risk to staff. If there is a COVID positive guest, that one of the tests does come back positive, we've been able to minimize the contact group and the area as best as we can. And that's what we try to manage. So like Laurice said right at the beginning, we've really had to relearn how to do this. And as much as we essentially we have hospitality in our blood, this is what we do. We've had to put on a protocol hat, which is sometimes a bit difficult, and we're bumping heads terribly with our risk manager. But we're very lucky to have somebody of his quality on site. And then the two amazing doctors, Dr. Chris Nasami and Dr. Rabada, who's actually Kagiso Rabada's father, who was allocated to the Indaba Hotel. So it's just been amazing. And I must just tell you, working with Dr. Rabada, I'm going to give a shout out to him because I can see why Kagiso is so successful. I think his son is incredibly talented, but I think if he has his father's work ethic, that is why he is one of the top cricketers in the world, because these men have worked tirelessly alongside the nursing staff to make sure that, the quarantine hotels, so managing our protocols, keeping people safe, minimizing the risk, and moving people out, getting the tests. People are complaining terribly about test results coming back so late, and they have been on top of this. They have been incredible every step of the way, and we couldn't do this without DPW and DOH. They really are essential. And like Lumka said, we're lucky that it's the same group of nurses again, and we've really tried to embrace them and make them part of the Indaba team rather than working as two separate teams, if that makes sense. Trying to follow protocol as much as possible, but also trying to look after our PUIs or our guests as best we can, and little things. Birthday, there've been birthdays celebrated. I mean, how awful. So we've tried to make that special, and Candice has done it. Mother's Day, we did a little Mother's Day drop, just to try and make people remember that there is still a world out there. And it's tough, but we're getting through it. And I think mental wellness is important. People are outside, limited. It's frustrating for them. We've created little booklets that we've popped into the room for them, so that we've given them websites that they can go to, so they can go on virtual tours of the Louvre in Paris, for example. So we've really really research and try to find things that they can do online while they're sitting in their rooms. There's online yoga. There's just little things that we've done. Sudoku puzzles, which I pulled out the other day, and wow, they're difficult. So just really trying to make it as normal as possible in this very, very unnormal time.
We've got a few questions from Muchi, which I think Muchi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, which I thought let's deal with those. Because I think one of the big areas of curiosity is, what's it been like behind the scenes? How did people, so just to start with, Muchi's asked, what's a typical day like for hotel staff? What do they go through on an average day?
Well, okay, I'll answer that. So my typical day so far, I'll start for today, for instance. So I was up at, or in the kitchen at 6:30, helping them with their room drops, for instance, just to obviously, in terms of the speed and the process of getting through all the rooms. So we did it in 40 minutes, which was fantastic. So that was my typical day.
Before you go further, can you just because I know we discussed it before everyone joined, just tell people how there's an interest, is the hotel, how many people, what's the occupancy currently, just to get an idea of numbers?
So I think currently, if I said before, but Sharon, you can help me here, but I think we've got 247 in-house, and that's probably excluding the nurses that we have on the property. And so in terms of that, it's quite a lot of room drops to actually do for the chefs and obviously for the staff. So that was my typical day. This morning, 6:30, and then basically go into the office. The phones start from about
I think the connection's just frozen. Let's wait for that to unfreeze. I think it's the connection at Indaba. Because I can see Louise is still moving around. Let's see. And yes, please keep the questions coming. I can see there's a question from Nati and another one from Muchi, which we will put forward as soon as we unfreeze the Indaba team. Let's see what's happening there. Technology is never foolproof, unfortunately. Always issues. I was just wondering, is there anyone who's attending who is also part of a quarantine hotel? Do you want to put that in the chat? Great, have we got you guys back? I think we're just waiting for Candice to come back. Your connection froze. Okay, great, we got you.
Hi. Okay.
As you can imagine, we've got 250 people on our Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah.
Or watching Netflix.
Yes.
Candice, do you want to carry on?
Yes, no, certainly. So I'll take off, obviously, just after breakfast. We've done breakfast, we helped out with that. And then we go into our offices. So we have a team who does guest relations with me as well, who all help. And obviously, we're taking the orders from the people who are phoning in, listening to their dietary requirements, perhaps, just listening to them in general about what their kids are doing or what, if they got their grandchildren. So you just lend in a listening ear to them. So that's really a typical day, and it's continually, the phones don't stop. They just want to, find out. It's all about communication. So, they also want to know what's happening, and we obviously informing them, and they're obviously going to do linen drops at certain times. So there's a whole protocol of our day that goes through, and to get to all those rooms. So we actually literally phone each room every day. So that's, a typical day.
Natalie was asking, do you service the rooms daily? How does that work?
Okay, I'll answer that. So no, we don't service the rooms because essentially no one is allowed to go into a PUI's room. So even the nurses, as they go and check on the patients, only if there's an emergency can they go into the rooms, and they would be all suited up in their hazmat suits and everything. But on a daily, they see the clients at the doors. And even the food drops is done at the door. It's a knock and drop system. You knock and then the food is there and they pick it up themselves. So that was one of our biggest challenges at the beginning, because we are used to changing our bed linen every 2 days for people who are staying longer, and we just couldn't. It was such a bizarre thing to tell our executive housekeeper that you cannot do that. The people need to make their own beds. We can only supply them with fresh linen. they need to strip their own beds and make them, and you can't do it as frequently as you would like as a hotel, because minimum contact is what we are advocating for. So the rooms are not serviced at all until the guests that are quarantined are cleared and they depart. Even after that, there's a protocol on how to clean those rooms, because they have to be thoroughly sanitized.
And how quickly, I mean, how long does that take? What's the turnover of a room if you've got?
Plus minus 3 days.
3 days.
So Laurice, we're very lucky in that we've got I sort of joked about our risk manager that we're bumping heads with, but he's been absolutely amazing. We're actually very lucky in that we have a gentleman that works for the group, Stephen Smith, and he is a qualified health and safety risk manager. So he has been really, really instrumental in writing up protocols, training, rewriting protocols as needs change, because they do. You know, you'll start off with something, you know, you start off doing A, and 3 weeks later you're doing Z. It has been an incredible learning curve for us. And part of those protocols are indeed the red zones, which, as Limka said, are the guest rooms. So no entry into red zone unless you're in full protective gear, so PPE, but that's a full hazmat suit. And then only qualified medical staff or qualified, for example, let's say something goes wrong with a toilet. Okay, we're hoteliers, and when you're living in a hotel for 14 days and you're cleaning your own room and you haven't got housekeeping and people doing what they normally do, toilets get blocked. Okay, so maintenance has to go in. It's a health risk. Of course, we need to go and service the guest rooms as best we can. But that is done under very strict protocols. So it's certainly, we're calling it business unusual instead of business as usual. It's really something we've had to learn. And it's such a natural thing. Somebody will phone and say, I can't connect to the Wi-Fi. And you want to go, all right, I'll quickly come to your room. But we can't. We have to talk people through it. And we've had to really try to remind ourselves that we can't enter the red zones. Then we have the orange zone, which is just outside the rooms. It's the areas where the guests will come to. So those exercise zones, the area just outside where the knock and drop of the food takes place. And those orange zone have got a very specific team that goes into it. So they don't have any access with the guests, but they have access with the area, if that makes sense. So they also are in special PPE. And then we're the green zone. Other than Lumka sometimes on her nurse roundabouts, and that's why she's very far away from us. As you can't see here, but yeah, yeah, there we go. Thank you, Lumka. So we are what we call green zone, and that's obviously a safe area. We have zero contact with any of the quarantine guests, and very, very limited contact with the orange team, if that makes sense, because that's the way that we're minimizing risk. So yeah, very different. Laundry coming out of rooms. So our executive housekeeper is in a hazmat suit every single day, because obviously when laundry comes out of a room, that is treated as hazardous material now. So it'll come out in a special bag. The guests will leave it outside. We'll put the fresh laundry outside their room. Like Lumka said, they'll take that laundry into their room. So the sheets, I think we're doing every 5 days, towels every 3 days. It's on a rotational basis. Obviously, if somebody wants in between that, we are here to service, but that is the basic routine and rotation that we're doing. Each guest is given over and above the amenities, so their normal shampoos and all the nice smellies that you find in hotel bathrooms. They're now getting cleaning kits, so they're getting handy andies and soap powder. You know, so it's been an unusual, completely unusual time for us. And then the hazardous laundry linen will come out of the rooms. That'll get a special treatment. Our housekeeping staff, our linen staff are in hazmat suits throughout to minimize risk, and it then goes through the cleaning process, and obviously at the correct chemical and temperature, viruses are killed, and that is a normal hotel practice. So hotels, I always laugh at home, you know, we wash at 40 degrees, the eco wash, that obviously doesn't happen within hospitality and within hotels. So yeah, it's been different. So yes, our guests have got Ariel soap powder in their rooms. And we've really tried to help. And then, like Lumka says, once they check out, we have a protocol which was created for us, for our group, because Indaba is not the only hotel in our group that is doing quarantine hotels. We've also got some hotels in Botswana. And then the room actually has to stand open for 24 hours. So just with nobody in it. And then we can only go in and start the sanitization and cleaning, which is quite a very different to your normal hotel wipe down. And remember, that's already sterilization and that, but we're paying a lot more attention to demisting, so misting and foggers, a lot more attention to high touch areas, things like door handles, your television and your television remotes, things like that, where potentially the virus can linger and live on for a few days.
And are there any staff living at the hotel? Sorry, Lumka. Are there
Oh,
any staff
sorry.
living at the hotel?
Yes, we've got 60 staff living in as part of the team. So over and above the 247 guests and the few nurses, the 7 nurses allocated to our site. We've also got some staff living on property, well, some, quite a large staff team living on site, and they've been locked down. I mean, Lumka and Candice, very grateful to them, because they do have homes. They don't know what their homes look like anymore, but they've been locked down, and they're certainly here, and just have been absolutely amazing. The staff, the team has been amazing. Like Lumka said, we're learning to multitask. We're taking on other duties. So perhaps I was a receptionist, but now I'm part of the food delivery team. You know, our general manager, I think it was yesterday morning, I had quite a chuckle. I was rushing past to go and drop her some stuff, and he was out with the leaf blower, because, you know, autumn has come and the leaves are falling off the trees, and Indaba is not looking so beautiful, so he was out with the leaf blower. So it's just incredible to see when you say retooling and multitasking. It's really on incredible levels, because we can't have people on property, and you know, we're trying to mitigate risk, so we're really minimizing people coming onto property, if that makes sense.
Lumka, sorry, you were saying something earlier?
Yes, I wanted to say, you know, we're very grateful for this time, because like Sharon mentioned, that it's going to be business unusual going forth. So we have started this with the quarantine sites, and going forward, we need to be able, I think all the hotels will need to adopt new protocols in room cleaning and social distancing as a whole. So we have had, we are fortunate because we are having a head start. So now going forward, we will be the pioneers of how to clean a room once a client has been in, regardless of whether you know if they have COVID or not, because essentially you won't know when the guests start coming back into the hotels. So that's what I just wanted to add, that this has given us an opportunity to learn these things before anyone else, and we're very grateful.
And then we had a question from Masuk, from the Saxon, and he was saying, how do you balance offering personalized service while maintaining COVID-19 regulations? So how do you maintain that?
Yeah, well, that's a hard one, actually, I won't lie. So I think trying to balance, because obviously the protocols do have to be done and adhered to, and the personal side is also very important. And for me, it's exceptionally important, the personal side. So I think, you know, it's the way you communicate with your guests, very important, and how you communicate. It's all about respect. I think one has to understand, although it's a protocol venue, you still have to have respect for the guests themselves as a whole. And that's how I've learned to deal with it, is putting one hat on and one hat off, but still maintaining that compassion, you know, as we go along. So that's how I've done it.
Right. And I had a question about, were there any reservations for, I mean, it would be natural that some people would have been scared to take this on, or fearful of their health, or were there sessions with staff? How did you deal with that? Were there people who came out and said, this isn't something that I can take, you know, I don't want to take a personal risk?
Okay, if my team don't mind, I'll answer on that, and I'm sure Lumka will also be able to pop in on that, and Candice will weigh in. So when we decided to do the quarantine hotels, we certainly did, as I said, we had the DPW and DOH, the Department of Public Works and Department of Health, have been on board and really assisted us throughout. And we first had a look at risk, so minimizing risk for our staff, because that essentially, we wouldn't take on these groups if we were going to put our staff at risk. So we minimized risk, and how did we do that? We made sure that we had quarantine staff in already, so we knew, because they'd already quarantined for 5 weeks, that we could essentially say they were COVID negative, because there were no symptoms and nobody had fallen ill of that group. So we tried to minimize bringing additional staff into that group. Obviously, we did have to do that because you also need to have a little bit of a break. Staff wellness is also really important, and you can't just, work constantly. You also need a bit of time off, because otherwise you are going to hit a brick wall and you're not going to be able to offer that personal service that is so important to us, and especially to Candice and her team. So we minimized risk. We then looked at legality. So we looked at staff over the age of 60, not legally able to come back, as much as 2 of our staff really wanted to. They were, but we are part of the team, and we can contribute. We're not old, but unfortunately the government had declared them old. So they were immediately advised that unfortunately they would not be considered to be part of the quarantine team. And then we asked about comorbidities. So if you have a comorbidity, and these are very serious, because this seems to be where the highest, I wouldn't say infection rate, because a lot of people go, well, I've got COVID, but my symptoms are really little, so I'm not really going to be able to pass it on. No nonsense. If you're positive, and you can spread the disease, you can spread the risk. And you might have minimal symptoms, but I might have comorbidities, and then my symptoms could be really, really, really severe, and I could end up dying. So we've had to really be very careful with comorbidities, like diabetes, like TB, like low C4 blood counts, and once we had established that, we had the 2 doctors allocated us, came and spoke to us. We then had almost a volunteer team, if that makes sense, of people who were willing to be part of this initiative that we were going to go ahead with. So that was quite incredible. And I must say that it has been incredible. We've now got another team in, from the team that initially weren't working, but I think they were feeling so left out that they've come and joined us. And it's so incredible to have the Indaba team back together, and new people in, although we're a little bit, I said we're a little bit like a survivor island, we're a very close-knit little family now, and like, who are these other people with their strange ideas? But at the end of the day, they are really our much-loved colleagues. We have to keep reminding ourselves of that, and it's actually really great to have people back on board with new ideas, and just bringing in a bit of freshness, because we were getting tired. We were getting a little, to a point that I think perhaps we weren't looking at our wellness, and I think it's important that we relook at our wellness and allow other people to take a little bit of the work off our shoulders, because they can. So so we were very careful about that, and every single day, like I said, protocols are in place. Every single day is about protocols. So every single person has their temperature checked before they come. Well, they're on property. They have to report to the health and safety manager. There's a specific point that they go to. They get measured. If their temperature is high, they get isolated. He will go and check them again in 15 minutes. And if it's still high, then we take, the necessary measures. Touch wood, luckily we haven't had that. We have had some false highs. We have had a Candice. Candice's temperature was very high yesterday, but we think that was, we're not sure actually, Candice.
No, we're not.
I think she was just upset.
Removed from the team, from the office, and isolated. So really very careful about staff wellness, very careful about those crossover zones that we spoke about, with the orange zone, red zone, green zone. So very, very careful of staff staying in green zones if that is where they're meant to be. And red zones are only in hazmat and full PPE. So really minimizing risk. And yes, it's been scary, but I also think that you have to self-manage and take your own, your responsibility for yourself. And I always say that the risk is so well managed here that I'm more likely to pick up the virus out doing groceries at this point. I must be honest with you, because I think that we've really, the protocols are so well in place that our staff are so, the risk is minimized to an extent that I think we are as safe as possible. Obviously, I can't give 100% guarantee, and everybody does understand that. But certainly, I mean, I actually laughed. I joke. I say I'm part feral. I'm going to have to reintegrate, because I go into shops and people are around me, and I'm a bit like, I can't do this. Why are you all here? And why do you need stuff? Because I actually just don't want to have people around me, because we are so, the protocol is so strong and so strict at Indaba, and that's how we used to operating. And then suddenly you go into a Fourways mall or a food lovers market or wherever it was, and people are reaching over you for the potatoes. You're like, you know, so yeah, so we've really minimized risk. We've really looked at it carefully. We did have the doctors on board, and they came and did full presentations to us. We've had 2 further health and safety presentations over this time, and then as protocols change, so the training is done and as required. So we're just very lucky to have those expertise within our group. I must say, it has made, it certainly made our lives easier, because we know exactly what's expected of us. And it's also made people a little more comfortable in their roles, knowing that if we follow protocol and minimize risk, we are more than likely going to be okay.
I see there's a lot of fascination with cleaning, and there've been a lot of questions about that. The question from Judith is, how do you clean the curtains in the rooms after someone leaves, after a PUI leaves?
Okay, so that is part of that deep cleaning of the room. So obviously we don't clean the curtains while the people are in the rooms. We don't expect them to clean their own curtains. Hotels do curtain cleaning on a rotational basis. And this is something that is part of the cleaning process. So that is where the sterilization, obviously there is new products in that on the market that are being tested all the time. And we are getting those products, and we're getting reviews. So a lot of that is these misting and foggers. I'm sure people do know about them. You can go into offices, they will come in and mist or fog the offices. And that actually, it's a very fine mist that actually falls onto all surfaces. And basically, Lumka, from my understanding, actually does kill the virus.
Yeah, because it's heated. It's like a steam. So the heat kills the virus. So that's what they use on fabrics, all the fabrics in the room.
We had another question, which is from Han, which is, what is the process to follow if a staff member does test positive?
Okay, so that one's quite interesting. And as I said, we've got protocols in place for everything. So that again goes back to one of our standard protocols, our standard operating procedure protocols. So if a staff member does test positive, we need to immediately isolate that person. We have got quarantine rooms within the quarantine site. Doesn't that sound bizarre? But so we have got rooms standing in case there's a COVID positive, and that's not only a staff member, that would also be for a guest, a PUI. They would go into a quarantine room that's obviously going to be monitored by your healthcare professionals. Then a decision has to be made whether it is a high risk or low risk case, meaning will they be hospitalized, or will they continue to quarantine and self-isolate either on the site or at another chosen site by the Department of Health. So they could well be moved to a different site to isolate. They could well maintain on the site to isolate. They could go to hospital. And that is the same for staff members. Then the tracing begins. So we first minimize the risk. We isolate the person. We isolate the positive person, and then minimize the risk. And then we go on to the tracing. So who did you have contact with? Which areas were you in? So areas would be high sterilization, high risk areas. And everybody who came into contact would have to go into self-isolation quarantine. So no longer part of the service team, but into a quarantine situation where they can have no access and they would then have symptom monitoring.
They would immediately get tested also. The people that had contact with the person that's positive would immediately be tested as well. thank God none of that has happened, but that's the procedures.
And we're touching wood right now. But yeah, so those are the protocols. So tests are then done, you wait for your test results to come back and then take further action from there. And then also just on the testing, I know a lot of people are asking, so especially with the repatriation groups coming, because of the illness and the incubation period, initially when the quarantine groups were coming in, they were being tested immediately, but because of incubation, a lot of false negatives and sometimes false positives were coming through. Luckily, not at our hotels. We weren't one of the first sites to have repatriation. So the tests now, Limca, my understanding is between day 5 and day 7, because by that time, the incubation period is sort of in its middle. And if you come back after day 7 as negative, chances are you're not going to come back day 10 as positive.
Then I suppose, I mean, there are a lot of people from hotels here that are closed. What would you say is the biggest challenge for them to reopen? What do they have to negotiate across the space?
Like I said earlier, if you've been closed and now you have to start and you have to discover this new way of doing business, it's going to be quite challenging, because I think they would have to start with the protocols, because everything has changed. Everything has changed, not just with the country, but especially with places where people gather and people go. So I would suggest that they get specialists in the field who can advise them on how to start being ready to start working again, because you really need a specialist. You can't just do it on your own.
Are there any other, I think we've dealt with the last question. Any other questions before we close to 4 o'clock, so we're doing very well on time.
There was a question here about, did you change the rates of the rooms to take into account this quarantine situation?
Everybody's laughing. They're waiting for me to answer this one. Okay, so this was a very difficult one for me, because as the group sales and marketing manager, obviously we always, maximize rate, maximize rate, maximize rate. This certainly is not a standard group, and there are FedHauser accredited rates that have been applied across the board, and those are the rates that we subscribe to. Certainly, if you're going to open your hotels as a quarantine hotel, you're not going to be paying all your bills. Let's just put it that way. So you're going to be covering your costs, but and we're certainly very grateful, because we've been able to keep our doors open and keep the candle of the Indaba Hotel burning. But the rates are FedHauser accredited. They are fair rates, but they certainly are half and sometimes a third of what we would normally be seeing rate-wise. Having said that, during this time, we're truly blessed and truly grateful that we are seeing some business, because we do know that our fellow hoteliers out there, some of them on the group, I've been following the chat, I've recognized some names. It's so incredible to see. Thank you for the support, guys. But it's been really tough, and they have had their doors closed, and not even financially. I just think it's demoralizing, it's exhausting, just for morale to have stayed open has been incredible for us. But certainly when we started this journey, and also, like I said, we've also got properties in Botswana, so our Chobe Safari Lodge and our Indaba Gaborone were also quarantine sites, not repatriation site, but quarantine sites. We made the decision that it's really part of what we need to do for the country, if that makes sense. So yeah, no, it's not business as usual, and certainly we're not seeing the rates that we would normally see. The FedHauser rates are readily and freely available on the FedHauser website. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-star subscribed rates, and that is what we prescribe to.
And just to add on what Sharon said, it's a service to the country, because at the end of the day, we are helping the country, because we are all in this together. Us South Africans with our government, and we're working hand in hand. So at the end, we were not looking at profits at this time. It was just a service. When we put our name forward to FedHauser to say that we're willing to do this, it was more of a service as a give back, because we do service the government in good times. and we wanted to do this also in bad times.
True.
Yeah, I think we're going to round off. I just want to say that it's fascinating look inside hotel. And I'm excited that we started off our new series with this focus. And we are planning on having something more regular, and we've got a whole lot of interesting topics lined up as we go forward, bringing together different parts of tourism. But just well done to the Indaba team for what you've done. And thank you on behalf of all South Africans for looking after people in the way that you have. If we would love feedback from everybody about the webinar, and if you enjoyed it, and if you've got any further questions, we'll be very happy to pass them on. And just from us at Johannesburg In Your Pocket, it's really, it's been a privilege to host you guys. And we wish you the best going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure, and stay safe out there, everyone.